If I could choose anything, and I mean anything at all, to be here in my house at this exact moment, I would not choose a teleportation machine. But I won't lie, that choice wouldn't be easy. The sheer number of possibilities that teleportation opens up is staggering. I could visit any place in the world without worrying about the cost of travel, and without worrying about staying too long to the point of becoming bored, because I could simply activate a teleportation device and return home. I could also visit other planets, or, depending on the limitations of the teleportation technology, perhaps even different solar systems. I could be the first human being in history to discover and make contact with alien life forms. But all of this comes with a caveat. A teleportation machine would probably kill you on the first use. Let's begin with the first open question of this video. What is a teleportation machine? I know this question seems rather obvious, but considering that I would be entering a strange machine and mysteriously appearing somewhere else without actually making the journey, I would really like to know what I'm getting myself into before using this machine. For the purposes of this video, we will define teleportation in the following way: a device capable of moving matter from an initial location to a final destination. I like this definition because it is simple enough not to provoke any complex concepts, while at the same time being complex enough not to leave gaps or loopholes that would make the explanation take an eternity. So, let's begin. I enter this machine and select a destination. I turn on the machine, and I have just created a philosophical paradox, and a major one at that. There is no law of physics that allows for the cloning of matter. On the contrary, the laws of physics are prohibitive in this regard. So, if I want to create a teleporter, the only way it can function is by scanning the object at the entrance, destroying it, and replicating the exact same conditions at the destination. But wait, this literally means killing the person who enters the teleporter and creating an identical copy at the destination. This problem, in fact, is nothing new. This is a very old problem in the philosophy of identity known as the ship of Theseus. There are infinite ways to describe this paradox. One of them is as follows. A port has a wooden ship anchored in its region. Storms are frequent in this port, so whenever a new storm occurs, a plank of the ship is broken. When the storm passes, a port employee goes to the ship and replaces this plank with a new one. Years and years pass. Storms after storms batter the ship little by little, while employees always continue to repair the broken planks. Until one day, the anchored ship has had all its planks replaced with new planks. The question this paradox raises is, even after having all its planks replaced, is the ship still the same or not? And if the relationship between this problem and teleportation was not clear, here comes part 2. After all this time replacing the ship's planks, the employee was careful enough to save the original planks. Little by little, he put each of them back in their position until finally, when the last plank was replaced, he managed to reassemble the original ship. Now we have 2 ships. But which one is the original? Are both now the original ships? Or can we only choose one of them to be the original ship? Teleportation is the modern version of the ship of Theseus problem. Instead of the ship, we are the object of study here. If I am destroyed at the entrance and a copy of me is made at the destination, is this copy still me? Or would it be just a copy that does not possess the same identity, emotions, feelings, memories, and ambitions as the original? A big problem is being able to answer an even more fundamental question. What am I? What makes me myself? From a purely physical point of view, I can argue that I am a collection of atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and practically almost all the rest of the periodic table. If we are talking strictly about ingredients, these are mine. So, following this logic, it would be fair to say that if I simply copied atom by atom and managed to put all of them in the correct positions, I would make another Pedro who thinks like me, is like me, and experiences reality in the same way as me. But there is a different question from the ship. I have consciousness, and we still don't know the origin of this consciousness. I can think. I have a notion of my own existence. I know myself as an individual, and I can make decisions based on all my experiences built over my 23 long years of life. Would simply copying atom by atom, molecular bond by molecular bond, create the same Pedro with the same identity? This is a difficult question, unfortunately still unanswered. But that doesn't mean we can't create a beautiful discussion around this simple question. Entering a teleporter would eliminate the original Pedro. That is the only certainty we have. So now the whole discussion turns to whether the Pedro who arrives at the destination is the same Pedro who was destroyed. A good argument that we can use to try to clarify all this is the concept of continuity. Let's suppose that the human brain is the human organ that stores all our information, that gives us our main characteristics, who we are, where we live, or, more fundamentally, what our identity is. And I need to draw everyone's attention because this statement I just made is quite uncertain, and who knows, maybe it needs to be. Basically, I am saying that the brain is a human organ that stores everything we know as ourselves, and this is not at all scientifically established. This means that if I took my brain and transported it to another body, I would still be myself, despite being in another body. In this example, there is no discontinuity. What makes me who I am continues to exist. It has only been moved. I would continue to be certain that I am not my memories. My memories would be the same. My tastes would be the same. In short, I would be the same. It seems that the persistence of an individual would be related to a continuity of their physical being, or at least what stores our notion of being, in this case, the brain. But this would create another problem. Let's suppose I only take the parts of my brain that contain my childhood memories and replace them exactly with the part of the brain that contains the childhood memories of another person. This person would now have the sensation of remembering my childhood, which would make them me, at least as far as childhood is concerned. But clearly, we are not the same person. Even if there is a supposed continuity of memory, we still have different identities. This person's brain is not the same brain as mine. Now apply this to the teleportation example. The original Pedro disappears, and in his place, a new Pedro with implanted memories has just emerged. In this case, we break this continuity. Even if, for the new Pedro, he continues to be the same individual, he is not. So, it seems unfair to accept that at the moment the original Pedro is destroyed, so that the new Pedro can be constructed, the original Pedro ceases to exist completely, and a new Pedro may even be a practically identical version of the original Pedro, but they will not be the same thing. If we follow the path of physical or materialistic continuity, our official answer to the teleportation problem will be: the new Pedro may resemble the original Pedro, but he is not the original Pedro. But there is another path to this answer. What if, instead of assuming that what makes us ourselves is our brain, we assume that it is our memories? If the teleporter can completely destroy the original Pedro, but completely preserve the memories in the new Pedro, would they be the same person? The new Pedro would remember my childhood. He would remember my passions, my hobbies, my favorite clothes, the bands I always listen to, who my friends are, and everything would be perfectly consolidated as his experiences. He would even remember entering the teleporter and arriving at the final destination. If our criterion for a person's identity were the memories they have, we would not break the continuity of the new Pedro. He never, at any moment, under any circumstances, ceased to exist. Even if someone came to him and told him that he is a copy of an original version that was destroyed, he wouldn't care. For all intents and purposes, he continues to be a normal conscious being with a clear temporal line of memories from the past, present, and ambitions for the future. In the end, the entire discussion of the problems of teleportation boils down to a single fundamental question: what am I? The identity and its problems have been studied by philosophers since ancient Greece, and yet there is no winning argument. We may never have a definitive answer, and that doesn't make the question better or worse. The most fascinating part of being able to encounter such problems is starting with a seemingly totally innocuous subject and finding ourselves faced with a series of questions that concern our very existence. Never stop asking questions because they are a great way for us to know more about ourselves. Finding answers is not a goal, but a journey. And please, never enter a teleporter. Thank you very much, and until next time. I just wanted to remind everyone that we have an official podcast for the channel. It is available on the major podcast platforms. It's called Synapse. We have weekly episodes, and I would really like you all to listen and tell me what you think. So access it. The links will be in the description and comments, and I am very eager to know what you think of the Synapse podcast. Until the next video, now let's dive deeper into the incredible allure of instantaneous travel, because even with all these philosophical headaches, the idea of a teleportation machine is just so captivating, isn't it? Imagine a world where the very concept of distance becomes obsolete. Think about your morning commute. For billions of people, it's a daily grind, a significant chunk of their lives spent stuck in traffic or crammed into public transport. With teleportation, that entire experience would simply vanish. You could step into a device, input your destination, and in an instant, you're there. No more traffic jams, no more crowded trains, no more wasted hours. You could be at your workplace, then at a friend's house across the continent, and then on a remote beach on the other side of the globe, all within minutes. The economic implications of such a technology are absolutely staggering. The entire travel industry, from massive airlines to luxurious cruise lines, would be completely revolutionized, if not rendered entirely obsolete. The environmental impact of global travel, which is a huge contributor to carbon emissions and climate change, could be drastically reduced. Cities themselves might undergo a profound transformation, decentralizing as the need to live close to work or amenities diminishes. This could lead to entirely new paradigms in urban planning and potentially more sustainable living arrangements for everyone. But it's not just about convenience. As amazing as that sounds, the scientific and exploratory potential of teleportation is truly boundless. Consider the ability to explore the deepest, darkest trenches of our oceans, or the highest, most inaccessible mountain peaks, without the need for arduous, months-long expeditions. Researchers could instantly transport themselves to remote archaeological sites, bringing back invaluable artifacts and data with unprecedented speed and efficiency. The colonization of other planets, currently a monumental undertaking that requires years of travel and immense resources, could become a matter of mere moments. Scientists could establish research outposts on Mars, on Europa, or even on distant exoplanets, sending personnel and equipment back and forth with incredible ease. The implications for resource acquisition are equally profound. Rare minerals found in distant asteroids or on other celestial bodies could be brought back to Earth, potentially solving critical resource scarcity issues and fueling entirely new technological advancements that we can barely even imagine right now. The very fabric of human civilization, which has been shaped by geographical limitations for thousands of years, would be fundamentally rewoven, creating a new era of exploration and expansion. However, as captivating as these prospects are, the initial statement still holds true for me. I would not choose a teleportation machine. This isn't because I lack imagination, or because I'm afraid of progress. No, it's driven by a deep-seated philosophical unease that such a device, as it's commonly conceived in science fiction and theoretical physics, would inevitably bring. The seemingly simple act of instantaneous travel, when you really dig into it, unravels a complex tapestry of questions concerning identity, consciousness, and the very nature of existence itself. It forces us to confront what it truly means to be me, and whether that me can genuinely survive a journey that fundamentally redefines physical presence. It's not just a trip. It's an existential crisis in a box. To properly dissect this profound dilemma, we must first establish a clear working definition of teleportation. As I mentioned earlier, for the purposes of this video, we're envisioning a device capable of moving matter from an initial location to a final destination. This definition is intentionally broad, designed to avoid getting bogged down in overly specific scientific jargon that might prematurely limit our philosophical inquiry. It allows us to focus on the core mechanism, the disappearance of an object at point A and its reappearance at point B, without actually traversing the intervening space. It's like a magic trick, but with atoms. Now, let's delve into the mechanics, or rather, the theoretical impossibility that underpins the core problem. When I step into this hypothetical machine and select my desired destination, the act of teleporting, as commonly depicted in movies and books, often implies a seamless, continuous transfer of my being. You step in, you step out, and you're still you, to somewhere else. But if we adhere to the known laws of physics, particularly those governing the conservation of matter and energy, a truly instantaneous and continuous transfer of a complex biological entity like a human being presents an insurmountable challenge. The universe, as we understand it, does not permit the spontaneous creation or destruction of matter, nor does it allow for an object to simply jump from one point to another without some form of intermediate process. There's no cosmic cheat code for matter. This leads us to the most plausible, albeit deeply disturbing, theoretical mechanism for such a device: destruction and replication. If a teleportation machine were to function, it would likely operate by meticulously scanning every single atom, every subatomic particle, and every quantum state of the individual at the point of origin. This incredibly detailed blueprint, a perfect snapshot of your entire being, would then be transmitted to the destination, where an identical copy would be meticulously reconstructed, atom by atom, from raw materials. The crucial and horrifying implication of this process is that the original individual at the point of origin must necessarily be destroyed to prevent a violation of the fundamental laws of physics, specifically the prohibition against the cloning of matter. If the original were to remain, we would have two identical copies, a scenario that current scientific understanding deems impossible without violating fundamental principles. You can't just duplicate matter out of thin air. Therefore, the act of teleporting under this scientifically constrained model is not a journey in the traditional sense. It's not like getting on a plane or a train. Instead, it's an execution followed by a resurrection. The person who steps into the teleporter is not, in a very real and profound sense, the same person who steps out at the destination. The original Pedro is annihilated, ceases to exist, and a new, identical Pedro is created. This immediately plunges us into one of the oldest and most perplexing philosophical debates known to humanity, the problem of personal identity, a problem often illustrated by the ancient paradox known as the Ship of Theseus. The Ship of Theseus is a thought experiment that has puzzled philosophers for over 2 millennia, dating all the way back to ancient Greece. It asks a deceptively simple question about identity and change. Imagine a wooden ship, famously owned by the mythical hero Theseus, which is preserved in a harbor. Over many years, as the ship sails and endures countless storms and battles, its wooden planks begin to rot and break. To maintain the ship and keep it seaworthy, the harbor master diligently replaces each damaged plank with a new, identical one. This process continues until, eventually, every single plank, every mast, every piece of the original ship has been replaced. The question then arises, is this ship, now composed entirely of new materials, still the original Ship of Theseus, or is it a new ship, merely bearing the same form and name? This initial formulation of the paradox already presents a significant challenge to our intuitive understanding of identity. We tend to think of objects as retaining their identity despite minor changes. But what happens when the changes are total? If the ship is still considered the same, what exactly constitutes its sameness? Is it the form, the function, the name, or something else entirely? It's a tricky one, right? But the paradox deepens with a second, even more intricate layer. Suppose, as the diligent harbor master replaces the old planks, he doesn't just discard them. Instead, he carefully collects all the original, discarded planks and stores them in a warehouse. Once the new Ship of Theseus is complete, composed entirely of replacement parts, the harbor master decides to reassemble the original planks piece by piece in their exact original configuration. After much effort, he successfully reconstructs a second ship, identical in every way to the original Ship of Theseus, but made entirely of the original materials. Now, we are faced with 2 ships. Which one is the true Ship of Theseus? Is it the one that maintained continuous service in the harbor, albeit with all new parts? Or is it the one meticulously reconstructed from the original components, even if it was temporarily disassembled? This second scenario highlights the inherent conflict between 2 common intuitions about identity: continuity, which is the idea that an object maintains its existence over time, and composition, which is the idea that an object is defined by the stuff it's made of. Both seem important, but here they clash. This ancient Greek philosophical puzzle, seemingly about a wooden boat, becomes terrifyingly relevant when applied to the concept of teleportation. The teleporter, in its destruction and replication mechanism, acts as a hyper-efficient, instantaneous version of the Ship of Theseus. When I step into the teleporter, my original planks, my atoms, my molecules, my neural connections are disassembled and destroyed. A new me is then constructed at the destination using entirely new planks, new atoms and molecules, albeit arranged in the exact same configuration. The question then becomes, is the Pedro who emerges from the teleporter the same Pedro who entered it? Or is he merely a perfect copy, a philosophical zombie, a meticulously crafted replica that lacks the true continuity of the original? The implications are profound and deeply unsettling, challenging our most fundamental assumptions about selfhood and existence. It's not just a philosophical exercise anymore. It's about you. To truly grapple with the teleportation dilemma, we must first attempt to answer that fundamental question: what constitutes me? What is the essence of my identity? One approach is to adopt a strictly physicalist or materialist perspective. From this viewpoint, I am nothing more than a complex arrangement of matter. I am a specific collection of atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and trace amounts of other elements, organized in a highly specific and intricate pattern. My thoughts, my emotions, my memories, and my consciousness are all emergent properties of this physical arrangement, specifically the incredibly complex neural networks within my brain. If we accept this premise, then the teleportation process, while undeniably destructive, might not be as problematic as it initially seems. If I am defined solely by the specific arrangement of my atoms, and the teleporter perfectly replicates that arrangement at the destination, then the resulting entity is, by definition, the new Pedro would possess the exact same physical structure, the same neural pathways, and consequently, the same thoughts, memories, and personality traits. He would wake up at the destination feeling exactly as I did before entering the machine, with no perceived break in consciousness. From his perspective, the teleportation was a complete success. He simply stepped in and stepped out, no harm done. He'd probably even complain about the waiting time. However, this purely physicalist view encounters a significant hurdle when we consider the concept of consciousness. While we can meticulously map the brain and understand the chemical and electrical signals that govern its function, the subjective experience of consciousness, the what it is like to be me, to feel, to perceive, remains a profound mystery. We do not yet fully understand how physical processes give rise to subjective experience. This is the hard problem of consciousness. If consciousness is intrinsically tied to the specific, continuous existence of the original physical matter, then the destruction of that matter in the teleporter would mean the irreversible end of my consciousness. The new Pedro might act like me, think like me, and even believe he is me. But his consciousness would be a brand new, separate instance. The original I would be dead, replaced by a perfect imposter. This brings us back to the concept of continuity. We intuitively feel that our identity is tied to a continuous existence over time. When I go to sleep and wake up, I believe I am the same person because there is a continuous physical and psychological thread connecting the me of yesterday to the me of today. The teleporter in this model severs this thread completely. The original physical entity is destroyed and a new one is created. Even if the new entity is identical in every single way, the fundamental continuity has been broken. It's like turning off a light and turning on an identical one. Is it the same light? If the physicalist approach fails to provide a satisfying answer, perhaps we should look to a psychological criterion for identity. This view, often associated with philosophers like John Locke in the 17th century, posits that personal identity is not tied to a specific physical body, but rather to psychological continuity, primarily memory. According to this theory, I am the same person I was 10 years ago because I can remember experiences from that time. My identity is a continuous chain of memories, beliefs, desires, and personality traits. If we apply this psychological criterion to the teleportation scenario, the outcome seems more favorable. If the teleporter perfectly scans my brain and replicates all my neural connections at the destination, the new Pedro will possess all my memories. He will remember my childhood, my first love, my favorite books, and the decision to step into the teleporter. He will have the same personality, the same ambitions, and the same fears. From a psychological standpoint, there is a perfect continuity between the Pedro who entered the machine and the Pedro who exited. Under this view, the destruction of the original physical body is irrelevant. The essence of me, my psychological makeup, has been successfully transferred. The new Pedro is not a copy. He is the continuation of my existence. He is me. This sounds much better, doesn't it? It feels like a way out of the existential dread. However, this psychological approach also faces significant challenges, and this is where it gets really tricky. Consider the thought experiment of the branching teleporter. Suppose the teleporter malfunctions, or perhaps it's designed this way for some bizarre reason. It successfully scans my brain and creates a perfect replica at the destination, complete with all my memories. But due to a glitch, it fails to destroy the original me at the departure point. Now, there are two Pedros. Both possess identical memories, identical personalities, and both genuinely believe they are the original. According to the psychological criterion, both Pedros are identical to the original Pedro before the teleportation because both share perfect psychological continuity with him. But they cannot both be the original Pedro because they are now two distinct individuals, occupying different spaces and about to embark on different experiences. If Pedro A, the original, goes to work and Pedro B, the replica, decides to go to the beach, their psychological paths will immediately diverge. They will form new, distinct memories. This scenario highlights a fatal flaw in the psychological criterion. Identity must be a one-to-one relationship. I can only be identical to one person at any given time. If psychological continuity can branch, creating multiple individuals who all claim to be me, then psychological continuity alone cannot be the sole determinant of identity. It breaks down when faced with multiplicity. The teleportation paradox in all its forms forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that our intuitive understanding of identity is fundamentally flawed. Whether we rely on physical continuity or psychological continuity, we consistently encounter insurmountable logical hurdles. The physicalist view struggles to account for the subjective experience of consciousness and our strong intuition that continuity matters. The psychological view, while initially more appealing, fails spectacularly when confronted with the possibility of branching or duplication. Perhaps the most profound and perhaps unsettling conclusion we can draw from this thought experiment is that the self, that enduring, unchanging essence that we believe constitutes our identity, might in fact be an illusion. We are not static entities, but rather dynamic processes, constantly changing both physically and psychologically. The me of today is not the same as the me of 10 years ago, and the me of tomorrow will be different still. The teleportation machine, by accelerating and dramatizing this natural process of change, exposes the fragility of our concept of identity. It forces us to ask, if there is no truly enduring self, what is it that we are trying to preserve? What is it that we fear losing when we step into the machine? These questions may not have definitive answers. And that's okay. The debate over personal identity has raged for centuries, and the teleportation paradox only adds new layers of complexity to it. But the true value of this thought experiment lies not in finding a final, unassailable answer, but in the process of inquiry itself. By grappling with these profound questions, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe. We are forced to examine our assumptions, challenge our intuitions, and confront the mysteries of consciousness and existence. The teleportation machine, even as a purely hypothetical device, serves as an incredibly powerful tool for philosophical exploration. It reminds us that the most fascinating journeys are not always physical, but intellectual. The exploration of the mind, the self, and the nature of reality can be just as thrilling and just as perilous as a journey to the stars. And while I may never choose to step into a physical teleportation machine, I will gladly embark on the intellectual journey it provokes. So, keep asking questions, keep challenging your assumptions, keep exploring the mysteries of existence. Finding answers is not a goal, but a journey. And please, never enter a teleporter. Thank you very much. And until next time, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have an official podcast for the channel. It is available on the major podcast platforms. It's called Synapse. We have weekly episodes, and I would really like you all to listen and tell me what you think. So access it. The links will be in the description and comments, and I am very eager to know what you think of the Synapse podcast. Until the next video. Now, let's consider the ethical and legal implications of such a technology, because the advent of a functional teleportation machine, even one operating on that destruction and replication principle, would not merely be a scientific marvel. Oh no, it would unleash an unprecedented torrent of ethical and legal dilemmas that would challenge the very foundations of our societal structures. The questions of identity, consciousness, and continuity, once confined to the hollowed halls of philosophy departments, would suddenly become urgent, practical concerns demanding immediate answers from legal scholars, ethicists, and policymakers worldwide. It would be a global crisis of identity in a way. Consider, for instance, the legal status of the teleported individual. If the original Pedro is destroyed and a new, identical Pedro is created, is this new entity legally the same person? Does he retain the original citizenship, his property rights, his marital status, and his debts? If the original Pedro committed a crime moments before teleporting, is the replicated Pedro legally culpable for that crime? Conversely, if the original Pedro was a renowned scientist on the verge of a groundbreaking discovery, does the replicated Pedro inherit his intellectual property and his professional standing? The entire legal system, which has been built upon centuries of precedent, assuming a continuous, singular identity, would be thrown into utter disarray. It would be like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, but the hole is the entire legal framework of the world. The very concept of murder would need to be radically redefined. If entering a teleporter is tantamount to being destroyed and replaced, is the act of operating the teleporter or even designing it a form of homicide? If a person willingly enters the machine, is it a form of assisted suicide? What if a malfunction occurs and the replicated individual is imperfect, perhaps missing memories or exhibiting personality changes? Who is responsible for this damaged copy? Is it the machine's manufacturer, the operator, or the original individual who consented to the process? These are not easy questions, and they have no clear answers within our current legal systems. Inheritance laws would become an absolute nightmare. If a wealthy individual teleports, does their estate automatically pass to their heirs, or does the replicated individual inherit it? If the replicated individual is considered a brand new entity, then the original's will might be executed, leaving the new person with absolutely nothing. This could lead to incredibly complex and drawn-out legal battles over who has the rightful claim to an identity and its associated asset. Imagine the family feuds. Marriage and family law would also face unprecedented challenges. If a husband teleports, is his replicated self still legally married to his original wife? Does the wife have a right to refuse the replicated husband, arguing that he is not truly her spouse, but merely a copy? What about children? Is the replicated parent legally and emotionally the same parent? The emotional and psychological toll on families grappling with these questions would be immense, potentially leading to widespread social unrest and psychological trauma on a global scale. Furthermore, the potential for abuse of such a technology is absolutely staggering. Imagine a tyrannical regime using teleportation technology to eliminate political dissidents, replacing them with compliant, reprogrammed versions who would never question authority. or a criminal organization using it to create multiple copies of individuals for illicit purposes, such as espionage, identity theft, or even human trafficking. The very notion of a unique, inviolable individual could be completely eroded, paving the way for dystopian scenarios where personal autonomy is utterly compromised. Your very self could become a commodity. Even seemingly benign applications could have incredibly dark undertones. If a person could be replicated, what would prevent the creation of multiple copies? Would society then have to contend with the rights of these clones? Would they be considered full human beings with all the rights and protections that entails, or merely disposable duplicates created for a specific purpose and then discarded? The philosophical debate around the moral status of artificial intelligence and genetically engineered beings would pale in comparison to the complexities introduced by human replication via teleportation. It would be a moral and ethical quagmire of epic proportions. Therefore, the need for a new global framework of teleportation ethics and law would be immediate and paramount. This framework would need to address fundamental questions such as, first, the definition of personhood. What criteria define a person in the age of teleportation? Is it physical continuity, psychological continuity, or something else entirely? Second, the rights of replicated individuals. Do replicated individuals possess the same rights and protections as naturally born humans? Third, consent and autonomy. What constitutes informed consent for a process that involves the destruction of the original self? Can one truly consent to their own annihilation, even if an identical copy emerges? Fourth, liability and responsibility. Who is liable for errors, malfunctions, or misuse of teleportation technology? And fifth, the regulation of replication. Should there be limits on the number of times an individual can be replicated, or on who can be replicated? These are not trivial questions. They strike at the very heart of what it means to be human and how we organize our societies. The legal and ethical implications of teleportation would necessitate a complete re-evaluation of our most cherished principles and a monumental effort to construct a new legal and moral edifice capable of accommodating such a transformative technology. The journey through a teleporter might be instantaneous, but the societal journey to adapt to its existence would be long, arduous, and fraught with peril. It would be a challenge unlike any humanity has ever faced. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the scientific challenges. Because while the philosophical and ethical quandaries of destruction and replication teleportation are incredibly profound, the scientific challenges in even achieving such a feat are equally monumental. The concept of scanning every single atom and quantum state of a human being, let alone transmitting and reconstructing it, pushes the boundaries of our current understanding of physics and engineering to their absolute limits, and arguably far beyond. It's not just hard, it's almost impossible with what we know now. Let's break down some of these truly formidable scientific hurdles. First, there's the issue of quantum state preservation. A human body is composed of approximately 7 octillion, that's a 7 followed by 27 zeros, atom. Each of these atoms exists in a specific quantum state, defined by its position, its momentum, its spin, and many other properties. To perfectly replicate an individual, one would need to capture and transmit the exact quantum state of every single one of these atoms. This is where the Heisenberg uncertainty principle poses a fundamental barrier. This principle states that it is impossible to simultaneously know with perfect accuracy both the position and momentum of a particle. The very act of measuring one inevitably affects the other. Therefore, a perfect scan, without altering the original, seems inherently impossible. Any attempt to measure and transmit the complete quantum information of an individual would, by its very nature, destroy the original information or render it incomplete. It's like trying to photograph a moving object perfectly without affecting its motion. Second, we have the problem of information storage and transmission. Even if we could somehow overcome the quantum measurement problem, the sheer volume of information required to describe a human being at the atomic level is astronomical. Storing and transmitting this data would require computational power and bandwidth far exceeding anything currently conceivable. Imagine encoding the exact location and quantum state of 7 octillion atoms. This would be an amount of data so vast that it would dwarf the entire internet by many orders of magnitude. Transmitting this data instantaneously across vast distances, even within a single planet, would require technologies that defy our current understanding of information transfer. We're talking about data rates that make fiber optics look like dial-up. Third, let's talk about energy requirements. The process of disassembling and reassembling matter, even if theoretically possible, would demand immense amounts of energy. Converting a human body into energy, transmitting that energy, and then converting it back into matter would be an undertaking of cosmic proportion. Einstein's famous equation, E m at 2, tells us that mass and energy are interchangeable. The amount of energy contained within even a small amount of mass is staggering. The energy required to deconstruct and reconstruct a human body would likely be equivalent to that of a small star, or at least a significant nuclear explosion. Harnessing and controlling such energies for a precise, delicate operation like teleportation is currently far beyond our technological capabilities. We're not just talking about powering a light bulb, we're talking about powering a galaxy. Fourth, there's the raw material acquisition. For the replication process at the destination, a teleporter would need a ready supply of raw atoms: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and all the other elements that make up a human body. While these elements are abundant in the universe, acquiring them in the precise quantities and purity required, and then assembling them atom by atom into a living, breathing human being presents an engineering challenge of unprecedented scale. This isn't merely about having the right ingredients. It's about arranging them with atomic precision, ensuring every molecular bond is correctly formed, every protein folded accurately, and every cell structured perfectly. It's like building a skyscraper atom by atom, perfectly, every single time. Given these formidable scientific obstacles, many theoretical physicists and philosophers have explored alternative concepts of teleportation that might bypass the destruction and replication dilemma. One such concept is quantum teleportation. However, it is crucial to understand that quantum teleportation, as it currently exists and is understood, is vastly different from the science fiction notion of transporting macroscopic objects like humans. Quantum teleportation involves the transfer of quantum information, which is the state of a particle, not the physical particle itself. It relies on the fascinating phenomenon of quantum entanglement, where two particles become linked in such a way that the state of one instantaneously influences the state of the other, regardless of the distance separating them. In quantum teleportation, the original particle is destroyed at the sending end, and its quantum state is effectively recreated at the receiving end using a third, entangled particle. The key takeaway here is that the original particle is destroyed, and only its information is transferred, not the physical object itself. Furthermore, this has only been demonstrated with individual photons or atoms, not complex, macroscopic objects like a human being. Scaling this up to a human body, with its trillions of cells and quadrillions of molecules, each with its own unique quantum state, is currently considered impossible due to the sheer complexity and the inherent limitations of quantum mechanics. So, while quantum teleportation is a fascinating scientific reality, it does not offer a solution to the philosophical problem of personal identity in the context of human teleportation. The original is still destroyed, and a new one is created based on transmitted information. It merely shifts the scientific mechanism from scanning and replicating atoms to transmitting quantum states. But the core identity dilemma remains. It's still a copy, not a continuous journey. Now, let's consider some hypothetical alternatives to the teleportation paradox. Because given the profound ethical and identity issues raised by the destruction and replication model, scientists and science fiction writers have long speculated about alternative forms of teleportation that might preserve the original individual. These concepts often venture deep into the realm of theoretical physics, pushing the boundaries of what we currently understand about space, time, and matter. One popular science fiction trope involves the use of wormholes, which are hypothetical tunnels through space-time that could connect two distant points, allowing for instantaneous travel without traversing the intervening space. If a stable, traversable wormhole could be created, an individual could theoretically step into one end and emerge from the other without being destroyed or replicated. This would perfectly preserve physical continuity, as the original body would simply pass through a shortcut in space-time. The individual would remain a single, continuous entity, merely experiencing a sudden change in location. This sounds like the ideal solution, doesn't it? However, the existence of wormholes is purely theoretical. While they are allowed by Einstein's theory of general relativity, their creation would require exotic matter with negative energy density, which has never been observed in the real world. Even if such matter exists, generating and stabilizing a wormhole large enough for a human to pass through would demand unimaginable amounts of energy and technological sophistication far beyond our current capabilities. Furthermore, the physics of wormholes are still largely unknown, and there are many theoretical challenges, such as preventing their collapse or ensuring safe passage without extreme tidal forces that would tear a human apart. So, while it's a cool idea, it's still firmly in the realm of science fiction for now. Another concept for faster-than-light travel, often confused with teleportation but offering a similar outcome of rapid displacement, is the warp drive. The most famous theoretical model is the Alcubierre drive, proposed by physicist Miguel Alcubierre in the 1990s. This concept suggests that a spacecraft could travel faster than light by distorting spacetime around it, contracting space in front of the ship and expanding it behind. The ship itself would remain stationary within a warp bubble, effectively moving the space around it rather than moving through space. This would allow for apparent faster than light travel without violating the cosmic speed limit locally. While not strictly teleportation, it offers a means of rapid displacement that preserves the continuity of the individual. You'd still be you, just very, very far away, very quickly. However, like wormholes, the Alcubierre drive also requires exotic matter with negative energy density, and the energy requirements are absolutely astronomical. Even if such a drive were possible, the theoretical physics suggests that the creation and collapse of the warp bubble could generate immense amounts of radiation, potentially incinerating anything at the destination upon arrival. So, while it avoids the identity paradox, it introduces its own set of potentially fatal problems. It's like solving one problem by creating 10 new ones. Some highly speculative theories propose a form of information-based teleportation that doesn't involve the destruction of the original. This would require a mechanism to perfectly copy all the information of an individual, including their quantum state, without disturbing the original. This would be a violation of the no-cloning theorem in quantum mechanics, which states that an arbitrary unknown quantum state cannot be perfectly copied. If such a mechanism were ever discovered, it would fundamentally rewrite our understanding of physics. In this scenario, the original Pedro would remain, and a perfect identical copy would appear at the destination. This would then lead to the branching identity problem I discussed earlier, but with an even more unsettling twist, the original individual would still exist, creating two distinct, yet initially identical, conscious. This scenario, while avoiding the immediate murder aspect of destructive teleportation, introduces its own profound philosophical and societal challenges. It's a different kind of problem, but a problem nonetheless. If a perfect non-destructive copy could be made, what would be the implications for individuality? Would the concept of a unique self diminish if one could be duplicated at will? Imagine a world where individuals could create backup copies of themselves, perhaps for dangerous missions, or to continue their work after an accident. While seemingly practical, this raises serious questions about the value of the single life. If one copy perishes, another can simply be activated. Does this devalue the experience of the individual copies? Does it diminish the significance of their lives if they are merely one of many potential iterations? It's like having multiple save files in a video game, but with your actual life. The existence of multiple identical individuals would also force a complete re-evaluation of personal relationships. If a spouse or child could be duplicated, which one holds the true emotional connection? Would love and familial bonds extend equally to all copies? Or would there be a hierarchy of authenticity? The very notion of personal attachment, built on the unique history and shared experiences with a singular individual, would be fundamentally challenged. Imagine trying to explain to your kids that there are two of you now. Furthermore, the economic and social structures of society would be irrevocably altered. If individuals could be duplicated, would labor markets be flooded with identical, highly skilled workers? Would this lead to unprecedented productivity or widespread unemployment and social stratification? The concept of intellectual property, already complex, would become a labyrinth if multiple identical minds could claim authorship of the same idea. The legal system would need to grapple with the rights and responsibilities of these duplicated individuals, potentially leading to new forms of discrimination or exploitation. It would be a societal upheaval of epic proportion. This non-destructive information-based teleportation, while seemingly more palatable than its destructive counterpart, ultimately leads us back to the core dilemma of identity. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that even if our physical form is preserved or perfectly replicated, the continuity of our subjective experience, our unique journey through time, is what truly defines us. The moment a branch occurs, the original me ceases to be the sole me, and a new, distinct path of existence begins for each copy. It's a subtle but crucial distinction at the heart of all these discussions. Whether we consider the ship of Theseus, destructive teleportation, or non-destructive replication, lies the enduring mystery of consciousness. We can meticulously describe the physical components of the brain, the intricate dance of neurons, and the chemical reactions that underpin thought. We can even simulate complex neural networks and artificial intelligence. Yet, we remain profoundly ignorant about how these physical processes give rise to the subjective, first-person experience of being alive, of having thoughts, feelings, and self-awareness. This is often referred to as the hard problem of consciousness by philosophers like David Chalmers. It's not just about understanding how the brain works, but why it produces conscious experience at all. Why isn't a perfectly functioning, non-conscious replica of a human brain sufficient? Why do we have this inner, subjective world? It's the ultimate mystery. If consciousness is an emergent property of a specific, continuous physical process, then the destruction of the original brain in a teleporter would mean the destruction of that unique conscious experience. The replicated brain, even if identical, would initiate a new conscious experience, distinct from the original. The Pedro who steps out would believe he is the original, but the original Pedro's consciousness would have ceased to exist. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? Conversely, if consciousness is somehow independent of the specific physical matter, perhaps a fundamental property of the universe or a non-physical entity, a soul for lack of a better term, then teleportation might be less problematic. If consciousness could somehow transfer or reattach to the replicated body, then continuity might be preserved. However, this line of reasoning ventures deep into metaphysics and spirituality, areas that are currently beyond the scope of scientific verification. We're talking about things we can't measure or prove, at least not yet. The lack of a definitive answer to the nature of consciousness is precisely why the teleportation paradox remains so potent and unsettling. Until we understand what consciousness truly is, and how it relates to our physical being, any form of teleportation that involves the destruction or replication of our physical form will remain a philosophical minefield. It forces us to confront the possibility that our deepest sense of self, our very I am, is far more fragile and ephemeral than we might wish to believe. It's a humbling realization. The discussion surrounding teleportation, identity, and consciousness might seem like a purely academic exercise, detached from the practicalities of everyday life. However, these thought experiments serve a crucial purpose. They are intellectual tools that allow us to probe the limits of our understanding, to challenge our ingrained assumptions, and to expand our conceptual framework. By grappling with extreme hypothetical scenarios, we gain deeper insights into the fundamental nature of reality and our place within it. It's like mental gymnastics for your brain. First, and most importantly, these discussions lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves. By dissecting the concept of personal identity, we are forced to examine the various facets that contribute to our sense of self, our physical body, our memories, our consciousness, our experiences, and our relationships. This introspection can lead to a more nuanced and profound appreciation of our own existence. It makes you think about what truly makes you. Second, these discussions help us prepare for future technologies. While human teleportation may remain in the realm of science fiction for centuries, the underlying philosophical questions are becoming increasingly relevant with the rapid advancements in fields like artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and neuroscience. As we develop technologies that can manipulate life, create artificial consciousness, or enhance human capabilities, we will inevitably face similar ethical and identity dilemmas. The thought experiments of today are the ethical frameworks of tomorrow. By engaging with these questions now, we are better equipped to navigate the complex moral landscapes that future technologies will undoubtedly present. We're essentially doing homework for the future of humanity. Third, grappling with paradoxes like the ship of Theseus or the teleportation dilemma honors our critical thinking skills. It teaches us to question assumptions, to identify logical inconsistencies, and to construct coherent arguments. These are invaluable skills, not only for philosophical inquiry, but for navigating the complexities of the modern world, from evaluating information to making informed decisions. It makes you a better thinker, a better problem solver. Fourth, and perhaps most beautifully, these discussions remind us of the inherent beauty and wonder of the unknown. In a world that often seeks definitive answers, philosophy embraces the power of the question. The fact that we may never have a single, universally accepted answer to "what am I?" does not diminish the value of asking it. On the contrary, it highlights the richness and complexity of existence, inviting continuous exploration and contemplation. It's about the journey, not just the destination. The journey through the teleportation paradox is not about finding a destination, but about appreciating the landscape of inquiry itself. It is a testament to the human capacity for abstract thought, for self-reflection, and for an insatiable curiosity about the nature of reality. So, while the practical advice remains, never enter a teleporter, the intellectual journey it offers is one that is well worth taking. Keep those questions coming, because they are a great way for us to know more about ourselves. Finding answers is not a goal, but a journey. And please, never enter a teleporter. Thank you very much. And until next time, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have an official podcast for the channel. It is available on the major podcast platforms. It's called Synapse. We have weekly episodes, and I would really like you all to listen and tell me what you think. So access it. The links will be in the description and comments, and I am very eager to know what you think of the Synapse podcast. Until the next video.